Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable show this week in WordPress and tech. Got a great panel. It shows 692. We've got some fabulous stories. I think the panel are up for it. I'm going to let our guest panelists, our regulars, but guests, introduce themselves. First, let's start with Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
All right. I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, a learning management system for WordPress. So I create courses and membership sites with that. And I have a podcast for course creators called LMS Cast.
I listen to it regularly. We got Tom. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hey, everyone. My name's Tom with Convesio. We are the best platform for scaling WordPress.
To say a quality platform run by a CEO that knows about hosting would be a slight understatement, but there we go. I've got my friend, John Locke. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
John from Lockdown SEO, helping manufacturing companies with SEO.
And I've got my friend, the one that has to put up with me on Fridays. He has literally 2 hours of me. To say that he enjoys pain must be Spence, would you like to introduce?
Thank you. I think we're making progress. By the way, now that you have the little stream box, don't you have the button that plays the songs, the title from The Odd
I've got
Couple?
all sorts of plans, but I can't even believe
we're like Oscar and Felix. Dun, 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 dun,
I'm
dun,
planning to have all the sound effects, but I just don't get. It's the second week I've been saying that, but
it's Spence from WP Launchify. Thank you. That was a much better introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Before we go into the great stories, we've got a very important part of the show. I have met 2 messages from our great main sponsors. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. And by the way, I've got some great special offers from some of the sponsors. I've got recommendations for WordPress plugins and services. Where can you go to get all these goodies? Well, just go over to the WP-Tonic/recommendations and all the goodies will be there. Go over there. So let's start off panel. Oh, yes, only a small story. Our WordPress community. Oh God, the title goes on forever though. WordPress community attributes declining, market share to performance issues, increased complexity, blah, blah, blah. But it's an important story. Who should I select? Let's ask Chris. Let's go for diplomacy first before I put my foot right into it. So, Chris, what did you think of this small story?
I think it's a complex. I don't think you can really point to one thing that's causing the WordPress market share decline. And I'll note that it's also very subtle. It's 0.1% from the previous month. It's not like a stock market crash or some like giant percentage or 10 percentage point change. Can WordPress grow forever? Will it ever eat the whole pie? No. Every business and technology has a life cycle. And I think WordPress could actually shrink and still be a lot healthier in terms of adoption. Size of market share isn't the be all end all. It's more about the people that are participating in that piece of the pie. And if WordPress has pressure from other technologies that are taking up more market share, that can spur innovation in the space. And so that's, I don't really have anything else to say beyond that.
No, because it is a real witch's brew of a story, really. So, Tom, you know, what's your your reflection on this?
I think I agree with Chris. This is a rounding error. Okay, who knows? I mean, who's really going to look at this data? This data is aggregated in very, very big ways. You know, large data sets. Okay, putting all that aside, though, what got me was the things people jumped on as to the reason why this is happening. So there's a little flicker here. It's like, boom, we're pouncing on performance, and this whole like, it's becoming harder for people to know how to build sites. And then the comparison of this to Wix, which I don't know, maybe I'm just out of touch here, but that platform's like a dumpster fire. I mean, I'm like, I get into that, and it's like maybe it's because I'm so rooted in the WordPress experience, but I just I wanted to talk to everybody today about what their thoughts were on the reasons why this is happening. I mean, okay, yeah, sure, performance is something that I think we know there's an issue. There's a performance team that's been created. People are going to be addressing that. But the I was actually kind of a little bit more interested in this the comment that it's becoming harder to figure out how to build WordPress sites, because I actually have been feeling that pain myself. It's like, is it time to use Gutenberg and go in on all in on that? Or should I stick to like an Elementor Oxygen page builder type of thing? And so that rung a chord to me, because one thing that the Shopify users have done, and I feel like one of the biggest disappointments personally that I've had is seeing the rise of Shopify and it eat away at the WooCommerce market share. And my whole thing there is Shopify fixated on making it really easy for someone to get a store online and transact the first dollar. And that is something, the whole getting started and building process, Wix has simplified that greatly. And I still feel like that's a barrier that we have to overcome in the WordPress space. It's just not easy to get started on building a WordPress site, not as easy as it is on Shopify and these other platforms.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there. So, John, I think the comments were quite enlightening, really. The problems with WooCommerce, I've been banging the drum about that for almost 2 years now, John. The other thing is, and I think Gutenberg, I just think they want to buy. There's about 3 themes out there that are written, Cadence, what the Astra team. I really think that maybe Automatic really need to work with their partners and there was a great video that was published this morning about it's just so many opportunities, but it just needs the WordPress community to come together and get that. That's what I'm finding so frustrating, John. What do you reckon?
Yeah, the comments are very illuminating. Not only did Yoast write a blog, Alex Denning wrote about this too. There's a few other people I'm sure that I'm forgetting. But the bottom line is, well, I've seen a few people suggest too that it might be because we haven't been having WordCamps. That's the reason for the decline, and I think that's totally not it.
No.
I think there's a lot of frustration with the anticipation of where the block editor would be right now. And I think for the developers who have always been the biggest evangelists for WordPress and the ones who have really enabled it to grow and have been the ones pushing it to clients, I think there is some frustration there. I think another part of it is the rest of the market, like Wix, Webflow, Squarespace. At the lower end of the market, where people are just trying to get a quick site up, these are viable alternatives. And I think that's the challenge. Is I know that that's where the project is trying to go, to be easy for these type of people in the market and compete with those page builders directly. But I think that they just need to basically get this project on course and like have these things in core and not have bugs. I've actually seen a few like WordPress developers say too that it's at the enterprise level, it could be like pushing beta software onto users, referring to the block editor, that gets frustrating for clients. And that might be part of the stagnation as well. But I don't think that WordPress, as far as its market share, is going to plummet. But I think there is a danger where if the stagnation continues, at some point it might become like that.
Well, I think, John, I think it's really, really, really necessary for the major players to build an association, a professional WordPress association, and for there to be a trade voice at the table of these major decisions. Not a threat to Automatic. I don't want it to come across as some kind of threat to Matt or to Automatic. They've got their business interests. But I do really feel it's time for there to be a trade association and real input on the table that makes these major decisions. And I think it's just a sign of a lot of frustration about the present situation, John, which has come. It's like a family. The major issues aren't talked about, and then they just erupt. And it's normally the eruption isn't really about the real problem. It's just the symptom of problems not being discussed honestly. So that's my little bit. So what do you reckon, Spence?
I could break it down simply by saying, imagine you had a community of people that were good at carving wheels out of wood. And for 15, 16 years, we all got together and taught each other, sold how to make wagon wheels out of wood. And then all of a sudden one day, the person who brought everybody here said, we're basically going to introduce a new way to make wagon wheels. You have to melt plastic and you don't have much say about it. And by the way, even though you guys are still awesome at making stuff out of wood and everybody still has businesses carving stuff out of wood, you have to make stuff out of plastic now. And we're going to make a new machine that we're introducing, the plastic wheel maker. And it's not working yet, but we're going to introduce that into the core of everybody's life and business and everything. Well, similarly, here's the problem. We all got where we got because of the good old-fashioned HTML, PHP, CSS, and so forth. And everybody knows how to do that. So problem one started as soon as they moved over to this entire JSON-based thing, because again, Chris and I discussed this, everybody who's involved in any way, like blank face of like, I don't want to become an expert at JSON, and it's a completely different skill set. So if I want to carry on, I have to either be good at it or get somebody to do it for me. But I don't feel I have access to all the things that I've learned over 15, 16 years. Like I could really make a product, a service, a business. I could teach people from my mind, everything that got us here in WordPress. So completely cutting that out of the conversation in favor of JSON and all the new stuff, I think was mistake one. Number two is this full site editing is a poison waiting to kill off the rest of the well or who drinks from it, because the way to do things is to use the traditional themes with the block editor. This full site editing is such a distraction because it introduces a multitude of other confusing things for the consumer and for the makers. And we're barely able to talk to each other now because the third thing is the politics. I agree, and I don't want to talk about it here, but like there needs to be talk amongst the various people who make stuff. But at the end of the day, we have a clear mandate from above that they're not listening directly to what we need and what we want. And even if they were listening, they're not actually able to execute on a clear strategy of what's good for the community of makers and consumers. And as a result of those three things, that's where, even though it's a rounding error today, that's where it's given these other systems time to catch up. I actually tried Wix a couple months ago. I was blown away with how amazing the entire experience is and still continues to be. But there's one difference between Wix and Weebly, Squarespace, Shopify, all of them versus WordPress. You don't own it and control it. So we still have time to fix it ourselves. If we can deliver to the consumer or the enterprise a unified solution where all of us get together and say, ignore all this other stuff. Here's what you need. We can continue to get that remaining 47% share of the market. But if we don't do it, just look at it from the eyes of a business or a consumer. I'm a company that sells this or that, the other product. Somebody comes to me who's an intermediary who says, oh, I can set you up today on Shopify, and you could be using Shopify yourself, or on Wix, or on Weebly. They don't care about the 4,000 different pieces that you need to get a WordPress site going now with WooCommerce. And even though my business and consultancy is to help people, I find it maddening that I have to be every single day filtering through a gigantic mess of new plastic machines and plastic makers and ideas that are not what got us here. So quite honestly, I think we should put a freeze on full site editing, focus on consolidating the block project and privately sorting it out, and get WordPress into a streamlined and politically simplified thing that doesn't favor one company over another, because that's a bigger problem too. There's
I think Jamie from Poodle Press, I think it is, had a great video. Had a great video this morning about a new way of a new theme generator. So it really, and it solves this. I totally agree with you about full editing. John, I noticed in the comments the comments that support the Tavern and the other articles that were linked, that there was, from some of the small plugin and theme independent producers, there was a lot of negativity about a major player in the WordPress community that seems to totally dominate SEO, you know, that their properties, and they were saying in the comments that they felt that they were being totally squeezed out by this player and their dominance of SEO. I didn't totally agree with it. I don't know if you noticed those comments, John, and I know this is your speciality. They do, this particular individual in his business does seem to totally dominate WordPress SEO, and I'm puzzled how they've achieved that anyway.
Okay, so that one is very easy. I didn't see a lot of that on the Tavern comments, but I did see that in some of the Facebook groups that are centered around WordPress. That's a common sentiment. The truth is, when you have multiple sites that already have some authority, you can cross-link between them, and SEO becomes a lot easier when you do that, when you have multiple properties that are already established. Google just seems to trust them like that. So there's a force multiplier that happens with that. And that's what Google has said that they want to do themselves for a long time, since 2008. That's who they want to rank, is large brands versus little guys. They would rather trust a larger brand. So that's the reason why. I get that. I think that there's some criticism that happens of various WordPress companies and entities, and I don't think it's necessarily like frustration that they are more successful. Sometimes it's the methodology.
Yeah, I thought I could understand what they were saying, and I do believe, and I don't really want to fall out with this particular company and its founder. I do have problems with some of their business practices, and I have a slight problem with the founder. But on the other hand, I don't want him coming after me, but I'm not prepared just to lie about it. But on the other hand, I do think there are mythologies about niching, finding a Pacific. There are ways of overcoming these issues, so I felt it was a bit overblown. So Spencer, just to finish off before we go for a break, and then let's get Chris into it. You know, I didn't want this conversation. It's probably going to take the whole of the first half up, but it is a very multifaceted and important conversation, Chris. Have you got one or two things that would clearly, that you feel that they were done in the next 6 months would really help this situation? I think there are clear things that could be done that would improve the situation. And I'm puzzled why they're not being done, but there's probably forces behind commercial reasons why it won't be done. What do you think, Chris? Got any?
Are you referring to SEO dominance or to the decline in market share?
Well, I think the decline in market share is a bit of a red herring, but it allows people who, if you don't see that decline, feel that they can't say anything because the ship is, it's still going at full speed and everything's great, but everybody under the cover knew there were major problems. But now with this slight decline, it enables people to start saying things, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it is important to have, data to look at to inform what your argument is. I mean, to really right the ship, there's a couple of things at play. It's super complex, but one thing that Spencer alluded to is the changing requirements of the quote modern WordPress developer. It's gotten harder. A lot of the skills from the past aren't enough anymore. So it's causing a huge, in some ways, die off of some of the older style developers. And I've seen that in people that create products for WordPress or do agency work where they're either not wanting or able to kind of adapt and move forward. I think that's like the biggest thing that could be affecting market share. It opens a door for more innovation if somebody is really going forward with full site editing mindset, block editing mindset. Gutenberg is bigger than WordPress mindset, but that's all a really big strategic bet that WordPress is making that may or may not pan out advantageously. So, and there's another thing I just want to call out, which is I've seen after 14 years or something like that in WordPress is there are products and personalities / influencers and communities, micro communities within WordPress that kind of come and go in waves. So, what is the next big wave for WordPress in terms of excitement, new product energy, where it becomes like fun and it's like a magnet that draws people in instead of repels them away. So that's from like a cultural standpoint, that's what WordPress needs right now to move forward, is to kind of get the groove back. But this groove in 2022, this excitement is going to be different than what it was before. People like Matt Medeiros touch on it and like the challenges of the blue collar digital worker. And there have been challenges, but is there a way to re-inject that excitement and energy into the WordPress freelancer and agency space and the product creator space, so that we start ticking back up in the other direction? And that's where leadership comes in, both at the highest level in WordPress, but also with the individuals and brands that participate in the space. So I don't have a clear sight on how to get there, but that's the main friction point, the ways of the past versus kind of that whole innovate or die kind of mindset on the leading edge, and trying not to leave anybody behind and being exclusive about all that. Being inclusive is super important.
So Tom, I knew you were just about to say something, but you're going to have the last word before we go for our break, Tom. But Tom, I feel that, the first step business or personally around dealing with a problem is admitting that there is a problem. And I just don't feel that the leadership and are identifying that there's a problem. And that's the first step in dealing with a problem business-wise or personally, is admitting that there's the problem. How do you respond to that, Tom?
Well, so first of all, Chris is like a philosopher of WordPress. I love it. I love it. I'm like, ooh, it's like we've got this spiritual Sherpa on the thing. It's quite different than Spencer's vibe. So, here's the problem, right? Automatic, Matt, whomever it is, has this vision of where we're going. And a lot of times, there's a lot of parallels between this and changes like Apple has made over its technology. When you have a company and a person or a team of people that have a vision for the future, sometimes it's simply awkward getting to that vision. And we're in this awkward state where nothing moves fast enough. Things are partially built. We're not at the end destination yet. And it has been, to Spencer's point and Chris's and John's, there's a lot of change. We have seen a lot of disruptive change, and that unsettles people. But, you know, sometimes, and I agree with you, I don't think anyone's going to admit there's a problem right now because we're not at the end destination. And so nobody wants to, I don't think anyone would want to jeopardize like the vision of where we're going and say, you know, there's a bunch of problems and, you know, we need to rethink some of the things that we're doing. I think the likely what's going to wind up happening is we're just going to have to push through this awkward time and these things and just continually get better at stuff that's happening in the WordPress community and our ability to adapt to things. And it's
I totally understand where you're coming from, Tom. But the only concern I have with that remark is that this has been going on for the past couple of years, really, which is and I just don't see it getting better. That's the problem.
Can I add something on to that? Because I think, first of all, I like Tom's observation, and I feel that way about Chris too. Chris and I are, I think, very good friends because we're very diametrically opposite in our mannerisms. I like to be very forward in what's on my mind, and Chris is much more diplomatic in that sense. But I do agree that it feels intuitively to me that the innocence of the original WordPress is gone and it won't come back. And I'm not cynical because everything of my youth that I talk about from a million years ago has been lost, but that doesn't mean that I want it. It's just not there, like dial-up telephones and stuff. But what I do feel is a real risk for all of us is once we go down a path that alienates the clever individual, the creative spirit, the tinkerer, okay? No offense to him, but I'll pick on Yoast. It's all Yoasts all the time, or it's all Awesome Web all the time. It's all big money all the time, because the only one who will win will be the company that has the resources and the manpower to develop the solutions and politically push them forward. And I feel like we can stop that right now by putting a chokehold and pausing full site editing and at least stick with what got us to the dance, which is the underlying theme framework, the existing one. And we can still have our blocks and eat it too, because then those two worlds, I mean, that's the world we're still in. Like a tinkerer can still play in that world. A tinkerer can still make a product or service on a weekend in that world. As soon as we go down the full site editing block thing, and as soon as the politics of how stuff gets sold get pushed up into consolidation mode, it's too late. And here's why it's important to me as a marketer first, okay? You got to be thinking about who we're selling this to, okay? WordPress was always attractive to the person who's like, hey, I'm a small business owner and I just want to make a new website for my thing or a new e-commerce thing for my thing. They can go do that right now on their own for free. WordPress has to be sold by an intermediary who says, but wait, there's something you're not thinking about by buying a tricycle today. You need the 10-speed bicycle today, and I'll help you learn to ride it because then you won't regret it later. And if we all lose the intermediaries because they can't get involved at the participatory level anymore, or it's non-competitive, like Matt talked about how WordPress should not be selling $5,000 services at the same time they're an advocate for the rest of us, then it's going to be too late. And quite honestly, it's not like I'm sad, I'll move on to something else, but like for fart's sake, it's 16 years in this community. Why don't we stop it now and fix it for ourselves? And that seems to me to be my own mandate this year. I mean, it's just crazy. I just don't I don't know why there's not a higher level conversation other than the obvious, which is the investors want that to happen at Automatic.
Yeah, I think we'll go for a break. It's been a fabulous discussion. I really enjoyed it. We're going to go for our break, folks. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. before we go into the other stories, I don't want to say Spence and myself do a great live show. It's called Sales Funnels Live. We're going to be doing that around 10:15. I'm still calling it Sales Funnels Live, right?
Oh, come on, call it what it is.
No, Sales Funnels Live. Sales Funnels Live. We're doing it around 10:15. Spence has got the pleasure of dealing with me. He's getting
We had a plan.
He's getting rattled. You change things constantly, Spence, which is
Oh my God.
one of your strengths, but we need to keep to a pattern, Spence. It's going to be a fun show. You watch me and you watch Spence literally implode in front of you in dealing with me. That's highly entertaining in its own right. So please join us for the live show. It's going to be entertaining. We're going to be talking about all things about building landing pages and marketing automation aimed at providing services to your clients. We'll see you on the live show. So let's go into the next story. Apple director of machine learning exits over return to office policy. So let's start with Chris again, the philosopher of the show. Spence has left us because he's not happy, so he's gone already. Chris, there seems to be a rebellion at Apple. They're not happy going back to the headquarters, to the dome. They seem to want their liberty. What's the problem, Chris?
I just see this more in the macro shifts in power that we see over time, from like decentralized to centralized, from the powerful to the people, from conservative to liberal. There's like this undulation that happens, and right now the pendulum is at least in terms of who has control over the workplace. It's really in the hands of the people right now, and now they've gotten comfortable with work from home. Some like it, some don't want to go back, some have more health concerns than others. So I think this is just it. This is just a high profile company with a leader who's taken a stand and prioritizing their preference and how they work over what the company mandates. And, just like WordPress puts the power as a decentralized open source operating system for the web, it puts the power in the hands of the people. It's opposite to the centralized walled garden SaaS model of CMSs. So this is the wave we're on. And maybe this last story we had, the wave is tipping the other way again. But I think this is all great stuff in terms of the future of work. I think it's better in a lot of ways. But also I think a hybrid model makes sense. And humans need to get together. They need to get around real whiteboards and break bread together and shake hands and stuff like that. So it's not an either or dynamic, but the people have spoken.
Well, John, they need to force these employees back to the dome, don't they? They can't have them actually doing some work at home, can they, John?
Oh, Daniel Schutzmus in the comments said that Apple has a very expensive campus, so I'm sure the folks at the top want to make use of it. That's part of it. I think in any organization, there's a level of middle management that has nothing to do if people are, self-regulating and they're doing their work at home. I think there might be a level of distrust that, oh my God, the employees aren't doing their work. You have to keep our eyes on them at all times. But I think
got to spy on them, and Yeah.
On this article too, I seen somebody say that people in retail and manufacturing might, they're like, oh, this guy looks down on us because we have to be in a physical location. It's just the nature of the work. Digital work can be done remotely from anywhere, and I don't think that that's anybody's fault or anything like that. But I think that it makes sense. I mean, why commute, spend a lot of gas, time in traffic, and spend like 3 hours a day commuting to go to an office and be around people, you know, with COVID coughing in your face, you know?
Lovely, isn't it? What a prospect.
So,
So, Tom, you know, I imagine, I don't know, are you a totally distributed company or do you have an office?
We are.
How do you build, you know, there are problems with the distributed model of building a culture that's unique to your business. So I'm not, I agree with Chris, you know, the interesting thing in the next couple of years is how you build a hybrid solution that's effective. Have you thought about these issues and things in your own mind?
Yes, and particularly about Apple, you know, in everything that I've read about Apple, and you know, I spent 12 years working in the San Francisco Bay Area at tech companies, and you're right, there's a lot of that collaboration that's in person, getting around a whiteboard, diagramming things, brainstorming things, grabbing coffee with your coworkers. All of these things, the relationships strengthen to make you work better together. It's like I tell my team, it's like, just because you hire a bunch of rock star players, you don't have a really cohesive sports team. You've got to practice and learn how to execute together. And so being in person speeds that up. Apple as a company, from what I have read, has always placed a very high premium. That's why they built the campus that they built, on people being together. Like, they believe your output is better. Collaborative innovation is better when you're together. And so, you know, look, you can be a completely distributed company and work really well together and have accountability and all of this stuff. But, you know, I don't know, to be honest with you, if I can say you're better or worse if you're distributed versus in person, because I think there's pros and cons to each one of them.
The reason I'm laughing, Tom, is Craig's little comment. Maybe they all need a new Starbucks NFT. I had a slight rant last week. Went on a bit of one of my Jonathan rants, Tom. So I think that's what Craig is remarking. It was quite entertaining, though, I think. I'm not going that way, Craig.
Are NFTs worth anything anymore? I mean, wasn't that so last week? I mean...
Exactly. So last week, Craig, I gotta say. On to the next story, because we've got at least cover 3 stories. We had a bit of a chat about this last week, but I've got to say, Master WP are really hitting it out the park. Got good news panels. Some of their editors and writers are going to be joining us regularly on the Roundtable show. That should be quite entertaining. Hopefully, I'm having a chat with them. Hopefully, they're going to join us on a regular basis panel. That should liven things up, shouldn't it? It's not lively as it is, but it's going to get even more livelier. So, Jailbreaking WordPress and the MemberPress renew crisis. What do you reckon about this one, Spence? You know, yeah, it's a bit of I'm not very impressed with what MemberPress have done, really. What do you reckon?
First of all, I agree. Rob Howard and, you know, what Master WP is doing, I love. I may actually be publishing some stuff there shortly, but nevertheless, I like the fact that it's a salient type of a publication. There's nothing against the Tavern, but by the way, I want to bring in the fact that Justin Tedlock announced his retirement from the Tavern, and the Tavern is always and the Tavern is always sort of like on the edge of people's minds, like, isn't that paid for by Automatic? Whereas Master WP is speaking, you know, Emperor's new clothes here. So his point, which although they have a solution for it because they have a product, WP Wallet, is very, very on the same space where I'm talking about, which is you have a problem because there are first generation plugins that are no longer necessary. A membership plugin is no longer necessary, in my professional opinion, in a world where you have a transactional engine of WooCommerce, you have marketing automation through a CRM directly like Fluent, or through WP Fusion connecting to your CRM, or by using a specialty thing like an LMS like Lifter. So some of these components themselves are still useful for a very small share of people who just want one plugin to do it all. But the problem is that they introduce themselves into this ecosystem of other stuff that they bump into. Now, that by itself would be fine, except this power play move comes in where, again, I'm not saying it was Automotive directly, but somehow maybe Automotive pulled the trigger on their 40% and said, cut off everybody as soon as they stop paying. And that violates the principle of what WordPress is supposed to do. But in the consequence, these people who didn't know any better end up with stuff breaking. And now we're in the same conversation. Like, why do you have this plugin here? And why is it in the stack of stuff? And so the bottom line is, his point is, you can hack it. You can go and rip the code out. Sure, I could do that. But then what does that make me as a business person? My business is to go tell another plugin author, you're an asshole. Sorry. And I'm going to take your stuff out and give your plugin away for free. No, the problem is that shouldn't ever happen in the WordPress ecosystem on top of all of our other existential problems. Like, don't we all see that we're creating our own problems? Like it's like red and blue here. We can't allow one company to go break the rules and spray paint on the wall, because then another company spray paints on a wall. And this is a perfect example. And so I feel like a little bit of an evangelist or Robin Hood here, but like, this is self-preservation for all of us and for our customers by saying, we need to sort our own stuff out and make this whole experience more like a Wix, more like a Shopify,
Yeah,
more like...
sorry, Bolsey, this was just a bridge too far for, he's going to come after me. Fair enough. He doesn't like me anyway.
And again,
fair enough.
One thing, I just want to lay this out here objectively. I am willing to take the chance because I don't suffer any ill will either way. Why doesn't somebody from MemberPress say something? Why doesn't
the founder's embarrassed? That's why.
No, because even the other companies that had to roll back the truck, like WordPress.com, they came out and said, oops, we made a mistake. Or even like the poor guy who put all that premium plugin stuff into his avatar thing. He had to go like, oops, sorry, whatever. Not a peep. Nobody's saying anything. And that is the most telling thing of all, of what really happened here.
So, Tom, I just think this was a minor, but it's just a bridge too far, Tom.
This is total BS. Total BS. If people start shutting stuff down when licenses expire, that is ridiculous. Do you know how many people have plugins running in their site that they don't know they have to renew licenses for and forget? You're going to start breaking people's businesses online and stopping their store and their products from delivering because your license code expired.
Ransomware.
Hey, go friggin' build a SaaS platform if that's what you want to do. Okay? This is the plugin ecosystem. It is not supposed to work like that.
And he gets away with it. He gets away with it because of the backer, because he gets away with it because he's got this SEO grip on the WordPress. Sorry, it needs to be sorted out. And he needs to be, somebody needs a serious chat with him. The management need to have a conversation with him and sort him out because this ain't on. What do you reckon, Chris? Do you think the higher management needs to, of the WordPress community needs to have a word with these people?
I think the WordPress community needs to have a word with each other and figure out which way we want to go here. Because, and I think, in my opinion, it's going to go the opposite way of where MemberPress is going here in terms of maintaining a more freely open GPL environment. But I think there does need to be debate, and people that are pro kill switch should be at the table for that public conversation. I think that should happen. And I also just want to add that as a point of color, a lot of WordPress media is like written, and ideas are like kind of come from developers, written for developers. The fact that you can jailbreak it, or let's say like Paid Memberships Pro, puts their stuff freely available on GitHub public repositories. And I think Affiliate WP did this or used to do this as well. Like a lot of these workarounds and like, oh, well, if you don't agree, just, there's this like, it took this developer 5 minutes to find the little piece of code to take out to solve the problem. Most 99.9% of people have no idea what jailbreak means, have no idea, don't have a GitHub account, don't know how to create a zip file plugin out of GitHub or whatever. So the bigger issue here is how does this affect the real bulk of users that like John
I think I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris.
Yeah.
I haven't done it too, I'm terrible, aren't I? But I haven't done too much this episode, have I?
You've been good.
How the hell did they think this was going to go down? How the hell did they think this was going to pan out for them?
I like Blair, and I don't have optics into his mindset or his prediction there, but I could only think as like a long-standing member of the WordPress community, you have to expect it. In business, like expect some pushback here. And, in business and in life, we have to make a lot of trade-offs. So what is the trade-off here? Is this the best way to monetize better as a WordPress company? Is it worth kind of going in some ways against the intent or spirit of GPL and WordPress? Is it worth the fight to redefine GPL and what that means and what can people modify and how they can restrict people? So at some point there was a agreement that like the trade-off is worth it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened.
Right. So, John, what do you reckon about all this
yeah,
debacle?
Not much more that I can add that hasn't already been said, but just from a user goodwill point of view, I think it's a big turnoff if you're running this plugin and maybe you forget to renew and then all of a sudden you're shut out of your site. Now you're not only blaming MemberPress, maybe you're just saying WordPress itself is buggy and shutting you out. And that's the unfortunate reality, is a lot of clients, either they're not savvy enough to know why this is shutting down, or maybe they just remember it as there's an issue with the site being on WordPress, and then they go and start using
but John,
a SaaS solution.
But John,
yeah, go for it.
It's not a minor thing. You got a major membership plugin. So you're running a membership site, and I've got to say, I run a quasar hosting company, platform company, and we just, we take if they move from us, we just take the license keys out, but we don't cripple anything. This is somebody's membership website, and they're stopping you from looking into the major. It's outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a big turnoff, and it's going to end up, there will be a non-zero number of people that this happened to that will end up going to another solution, like a SaaS solution that's not on WordPress, because of this, because they're just like turned off by this. Not everything is, people get. I have clients all the time that they'll forget to renew something, and they'll get messages or something like that. So I mean, renewing a plugin license, site owners, they have a million things going on, and then they wake up one day and their site is crippled. Maybe they're losing revenue. So yeah, it's just not a good move, and it's not good for the
Can you imagine
WordPress ecosystem.
if Automatic did this with WooCommerce? Can you imagine if they had the audacity? Can you imagine the kind of publicity they would get? It's just bonkers. Yeah. It's absolutely bonkers. But
I get like needing to make money and all that. It's not a good precedent. If you want to see that number like keep dipping lower and lower, major plugins doing stuff like this isn't helping.
I just want to propose something that I have a lot of WordPress business friends and plugin companies, theme companies and stuff. And for these types of companies, the annual churn rate is typically around 50%. So these companies lose half their revenue or subscription revenue every year. So what would you advise is a better way for WordPress companies to better monetize? I just want to pose that as like, if that's the issue, like how could we do that better? Of course we can make better products. But
Well,
what else?
it's funny that you bring that up in, because there was a video by another friend of the show, from Paul from WP-Tonic, and I love Paul and I love his videos. But he was talking in one of his live shows that plugins, a single site license is too expensive, and he was getting a lot of people piling on, saying, "Yeah, it should only be $20 and blah blah." Sorry, they're living in a dream world. They live in Bonkerfield. Just made a word there, panel. Bonkerfield. They've got no idea of the support costs and the mucking around you got to do to onboard somebody.
You can understand from that what the cause is, because when you compare a Wix or Weebly or Shopify, Squarespace, for the consumer, they don't understand that you have to a la carte buy all the pieces and then get somebody to help implement. They just realize those are features and I can start with Wix for $29 a month and everything's included. And the problem is, without a unified front amongst the makers of WordPress, we'll never achieve that kind of an outcome. There will always be essentially tradesman, craftsman type of setups with an intermediary. So all these things are salient to the bigger picture, which is WordPress's appeal was tinkerers, DIY, get it there yourself, and then people develop businesses to help get you there. Now we're facing competition from an endless stream of ready-to-go platforms where they can onboard millions of people for $29 a month, and it's very sexy.
They report to do that.
Come on, you know how it is. I mean, my earliest days back in 2006, before I got on WordPress, was in the freemium space, and that's they can afford to have millions and millions and millions of free people.
I compare it to, because the best, they are fantastic marketers. It's the Kajabi founders, absolutely red hot marketers, and their spiel about it's really dead easy, and well, it really depends on your experience, but there's a whole ecosystem of Kajabi implementers out there that are paid.
There's only like a couple, 50,000. How many was the total user base? 50,000.
About 50,000.
Okay, yeah. And those are people with really high ticket products or services to sell. That's like, ClickFunnels, same market, but ClickFunnels is great at marketing, so they have
very similar, very good at marketing.
But WordPress's base, I mean, you're talking in the millions and millions, and many of those aren't necessarily at the point where they've got a product market fit or they have a service that can be sold. So to justify the cost, it's the penny wise and dollar foolish. I mean, again, this is what I spend my days doing. But I'll have a conversation with somebody who has one problem with one plugin, and they're saying, oh, this $29 thing is so expensive, so complicated. And then I talk to them, and they're willing to spend $3,000 as soon as somebody coherently tells them this is what they'll get, because it's actually solving their overall pain. But getting from the I have a boo-boo to you've just changed the way I eat and my life is different is a bridge too far if we're not all getting along and making it a coherent message. We're just tugging a war against each other here right now, and that's not tinkerers. That's
God. Imagine, can you imagine Craig as the voice of this podcast? He's even worse than me. You're even worse than me, Craig.
You have to invite him on. You gotta look. This is something we fight with all the time, right? And I agree with Spencer. There is a maturing, like, because you can do something for cheap or free does not mean that is the constant comparison that you judge whether something is expensive. This is this is seen very clearly in the hosting space. I mean, you can get hosting for people for $2 a month. Okay. And I can just tell you there's a very vast difference between the quality of service you're going to get and the seriousness of a company offering you a $2 product a month versus a company offering you a premium service per month. I mean, Kinsta just raised prices, you know? I mean, so we're going to see things like hosting get more and more expensive, I predict. Now, one thing that, you know, in the plugin ecosystem, there is so many free plugins. Educating consumers on the value of solving the problem is really what needs to be done. Because I do really think, as Spencer said, when you put it to them in a way where they understand, like, look, just because there's 20 free plugins out there that seemingly do the same thing, and you have to pay $29 a month for this plugin, stop comparing them, going $29 a month is so expensive for this. How big of a problem does it solve you? What is the value of that problem? And the frame of reference for this is not how people think. They think about, like, well, gosh, there's like, you know, a dozen free caching plugins. Why do I need to pay for WP Rocket, which I'm a huge fan of, right? And it's like, because they're a serious company doing serious things on caching, and I want to support them. And we have to, as consumers and users in this space, and I've blogged about this, we need to not take the cheapest free alternative all the time. We need to pay for the things that drive value so we can put money back into the ecosystem for innovation.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it, Tom? Because I also agree with what Spencer said. It just depends where you are on your business.
Yeah.
If you're bootstrapping or you're trying to start a side gig and you've got absolutely no money, you've got to do the best you can. But at least you can do, you know, you might. But it's really a witch's brew we got at the present moment. It just needs some guidance. It needs some adult supervision in the playground to do some sorting. It doesn't have to be too brutal, but this, just to finish off, this was just a bridge too far for me personally. I think it's outrageous what they've done, but it is what it is. That's just my personal opinion, for whatever it's worth, which isn't much. Panel or listeners, as you know, my views are not worth much. So Spencer totally agrees with that statement. On to the panel's recommendations. I'm going to start with mine. It's a bit outside, but I re-listened to the book and I watched the film, and I've chosen a slightly controversial book or film, American Psycho. Not the easiest read, not the easiest watch. It's about a psychopathic American, a yuppie, that goes around butchering innocent people left, right, and centre. And the reason why I recommended it is that this, as a kind of guest American, I see myself as British, but I'm also an American citizen, and I do love America, and I wish it well. But there is something a bit psycho about American society in general. It truly is bonkers. That's why I'm choosing it. I highly recommend it. That's me. Over to Spence. What's your recommendation of the week? And please, Spencer, can you make sure that Chris's and Tom's are in Slack for me?
Sure.
If you could do that, Spence. What's your recommendation, Spence?
If it makes you feel better, I see you as British and bonkers.
I'm totally bonkers, aren't I? Absolutely.
I want to speak to a topic on this recommendation that sort of fits in well with today's conversation, because it is the free plugin called the Menu Images Icons Made Easy. Shocking that depending on which theme you're using or block editor, it's not easy to take something like the WooCommerce's My Account link and just put a picture of a person so it doesn't take up so much space. I had to resort to a free plugin. But I also want to weave into the story, besides being useful across any theme or blocks you're using, this is the kind of thing that got me so excited from day one about WordPress and still gets me excited. And you know what? If stuff like this goes away, I realize I will not be excited anymore, because I was previously in another incarnation on platforms and you had to beg the platform to have something made. The fact that somebody can make a little tchotchke like this, or I can make the fixed Gutenberg style thing as a throwaway, that's what WordPress is about. And I think this is a perfect example. Even in a world of like everything, this should be part of the default core navigation, right? You could just put an icon in. Well, you can't. And with the block editor and all the rest of the stuff, you probably won't for a long, long time. But you can do it with the plugin.
Yeah, it's a great point. Tom, what's your recommendation? Is it American Psycho, Tom?
No, that's way too much time on my hands. I'm gonna have to start, doing more recreational things to get recommendations like
You
that.
don't want to read that book if you're squirmish, that's for sure.
So I'm going to do a shout out to a company that one of our team members actually went to work for, and they are doing some really cool stuff. It's Trava Security, and they basically, it's really interesting. They're probably more for established businesses. This isn't a website tool, but they've found a way to do sort of a security scan of your business's infrastructure.
This ain't you've got some expensive taste, Tom, when it comes to your tool. This ain't a $5,000 tool, though, Tom, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. I don't think it's that expensive.
Oh,
And and they basically give you a profile you can use to go get cyber insurance, which is really a big thing that I think a lot of companies need to do. If you don't have cyber insurance coverage, I think it's like going to be something that's very commonplace, like homeowners insurance and business insurance.
Well,
in the next 10 years.
You're so right, Tom. We do live in America, and Spencer, ex-lawyer, you like him for suing companies. There we go. Put it into chat.
I got it. It's in there.
And Uncle Spencer will put it into Slack because otherwise I forget. Let's go with Chris. Chris, what's your recommendation?
I want to give a shout out to Castos, which is a podcast hosting, but they also have a feature.
Well, you can definitely come back again. I guess you keep saying that because they're my major sponsor, aren't they?
They also have a feature which people don't always realize called private podcasting, which is really cool. Recently, they added Lifter LMS integration, which means you can have a private podcast for your courses. Each course can have its own private podcast, which is really cool. But also for people just getting started, sometimes people don't start with a membership site or a course. They start with a newsletter. But I just want you to know that in addition to having an email list and a newsletter, you could start with a private podcast on Castos. If you're not the writing type, you're more the talking type, and start getting subscribers and building your list or your community that way with private podcasts. So shout out to Castos.
Yeah, just a great founder, Craig. He's a bit dry, isn't he? But he's a great guy, and it's just a great product, isn't it, Chris?
It is.
And I'm saying that not just because they just pay me for saying it, listeners and viewers. I'm easily bought, though. Any contributions are most welcome, actually. There's only 2 companies in the whole ecosystem of WordPress I wouldn't take money from, and that's saying something. Anybody else, I'd take your money straight away. So, John, got any recommendations?
So my recommendation is a podcast that I discovered called Intersectional Insights, and the two
that rose off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, rhymes. The 2 hosts are Olivia and Raven. They are both blind. They are both Black women, but this podcast it's amazing. I love it. It's very cool. You'll get a lot out of it.
Well, you put it in Slack, haven't you?
Yes, I did.
Yes, because you didn't do last week's, I don't think. You were naughty, John. Naughty.
I'll fix it.
There you go. Panel, I think it's been a great show. Spencer's got he's already got a list of complaints about the way he's got endless.
I'm just excited for us to do funnel building live.
No, we're not calling it. We came to you've had weeks to choose the name of this. Weeks and weeks, Spencer.
I don't know.
I
have notes from us talking all Sunday about this, and
you sent me a Slack message, and I'll put my foot down.
I've even got an avatar.
Bloody name, Spencer. For God's sake.
What? Anything you want to call it is fine by me, Jonathan.
You've learned. I'm starting to train. You're starting to say the right things now, Spencer. I know it's hard. We'll see you next week. I've got to say that the listeners that are joining us live, Craig and some of the other people, you've been an extra panelist. Great comments. You can watch all their comments, by going and watching this on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. It's just entertaining just for that. We'll see you next week. See you soon. Bye.